As a Chelsea fan, Abramovich's reluctance to confront Putin never sat right. We Chelsea fans are accustomed to defending ourselves. Ever since Roman Abramovich, one of Russia's richest men, bought the club for £140 million in 2003, investing huge amounts to buy new players and reverse the club's fortunes, the Blues have mockingly been known as Chelsea FC. But now, perhaps, no more? On Wednesday, the 55-year-old billionaire announced that he would be selling the club and that net proceeds of the sale would be donated to victims of the war in Ukraine. And as for the gargantuan £1.5 billion that the tycoon has loaned the club over his years of tenure, he's prepared to write that off. Over the course of the last 19 years, the club has claimed 5 Premier League wins, 2 Champions League titles and a wealth of domestic silverware. For the latest updates on the Russia-Ukraine war, visit our live blog, Russia-Ukraine Live. But in the last few days, Russia has invaded Ukraine, bringing with it widespread global condemnation for President Vladimir Putin's regime. What was embarrassing for Chelsea this week became untenable. It was longer possible to separate Abramovich's money from Putin's reign in the way that Chelsea fans have always tried to. But this move has only come after a week of mounting pressure. On Saturday, Abramovich hastily released an eyebrow-raising statement of intent to hand over stewardship, not ownership, of Chelsea to trustees of the club's charitable foundation. Not only did the statement equal precisely zero concrete action, but it didn't mention either Russia or Ukraine. That shot hit the post when the foundation went on the defensive, saying they had not agreed to take over the club. The move, widely criticized as an empty PR ruse, is now being scrutinized by the Charity Commission as to whether it's even possible under UK law for a charitable body to run a commercial enterprise. Before Sunday's Carabao Cup final against Liverpool at Wembley, which Chelsea lost after a goalless match and a penalty shootout involving the full squad, the audience applauded for a minute in solidarity with Ukraine. Head coach Thomas Tuchel was questioned about Abramovich's move after the match and later grilled about the war in Ukraine at a press conference on Tuesday, despite being more responsible for running players than the club. He was understandably emotional and snapped at reporters. On Tuesday, MP and head of the all-party parliamentary group on Russia Chris Bryant claimed that Abramovich had put his £200 million London property portfolio up for sale, including a 15-bedroom mansion, in order to avoid having his assets frozen. That follows on from last week, when Bryant revealed that the billionaire was considered a person of interest to the UK government because of public association with corrupt activity and practices. On Wednesday, Sky News reported that the Blues boss had appointed advisors and a New York bank called the Rain Group to help sell the team. A Swiss billionaire, Hans-Jörg Wyss, told a newspaper in his homeland that the tycoon wants to get rid of Chelsea quickly. That may be connected to the fact that, the same day, Labour leader Keir Starmer suggested at PMQs that sanctions should be imposed on Abramovich, which could have spelled trouble for any potentially profitable sale of the club. So Abramovich's decision might bring some brief clarity to Chelsea fans and raise crucial funds for victims of violence, but to many fans, the motives look murky at best. Besides, net proceeds are but a fraction of the club's assets, while Abramovich didn't even specify which victims of the war in Ukraine would receive the donations. He has also resisted calls to outwardly condemn Putin's invasion of Ukraine or risk kissing goodbye to his cash. Boris Johnson has called the failure of some Russian oligarchs to condemn President Putin inexplicable. However, Abramovich is notoriously opaque, and therefore it was anything but. Johnson's braggadocio might have been more convincing if he hadn't, incorrectly, claimed last week that Abramovich was already being sanctioned, an embarrassing error, just one more, he had to roll back on. It's hard to overstate the significance of Abramovich's move, both for the English football landscape at home and for relations with Russia abroad. But what happens next is unclear. Ownership has been valued at £3 billion, a pretty steep price tag for a side whose last annual profits totaled less than £40 million and whose turnover is still recovering from a devastating pandemic. Wyss is said to be considering making an offer as part of a consortium, but it's likely that offer will fall short of £3 billion. Speed is of the essence, however, if Abramovich is to sell the club before potential sanctions hit. We don't even know where he is, since his private jet was reported to have landed in Moscow on Tuesday, while at least one of his super yachts is moored in the Caribbean. His exact asking price for the club also remains a mystery, and we don't know if any consortium in the world could afford the level of investment to which Chelsea has become accustomed. If this sale of desperation wreaks havoc on the club, there's an element of karma. The Abramovich issue is something that Chelsea fans and shareholders have been kicking into the long grass for at least a decade. To view this video, please enable JavaScript and consider upgrading to a web browser that supports HTML5 video. Despite his repeated denials, Abramovich's past links to Putin are widely suspected. In 2012, during Abramovich's legal scrap with Boris Berezovsky, a high court judge described Abramovich's very good relations with President Putin and others in power at the Kremlin. Alexei Navalny, the Russian opposition activist, reportedly views Abramovich as a key enabler. But despite that, Chelsea has never adequately answered for the accusations against its owner. In 2018, the year of the Salisbury poisonings, the Home Office failed to renew Abramovich's UK visa. He has since disassociated himself from the UK and from Russia, gaining citizenship from Israel and Portugal, and curtailing his visits to London. Previous bids to purchase Chelsea from Abramovich may have been rebuffed, but that doesn't suggest that the bid was wrong, merely that the price was. The sporting Cold War also goes far beyond Chelsea. Premier League side Everton counted a Russian billionaire, Alisher Usmanov, among its biggest sponsors, whose assets have now been frozen by the EU. Everton announced a suspension of commercial deals with Russian companies USM and Megafon, companies partially owned by Usmanov, who also previously owned a 30% stake in Arsenal. Bournemouth's rise to the Premier League was bankrolled by a Russian petrochemical tycoon, Maxim Demin. Further north, Manchester United have only just this week ended their sponsorship deal with Aeroflot, Russia's state airline. Until Monday, UEFA, the European football body, was sponsored by Russian state energy company Gazprom. And it's hardly waterbatory to mention the Russian Federation's latest doping incident at the Winter Olympics, even after Russia was banned from competing under its own flag at the Games, after sullying the sporting world when a widespread state-sponsored doping regime was uncovered ahead of Rio 2016. The fact remains that a river of Russian money, dirty or otherwise, has long been allowed to run through elite sports and the city known in some quarters as Londongrad. Thomas Tuchel reacts to Roman Abramovich officially putting Chelsea up for sale. Gary Neville reacts as Roman Abramovich decides to sell Chelsea. There are worse owners, what Mauricio Pochettino told PSG director about Manchester United links. Meanwhile, the UK government continues to prevaricate over sanctions, so far only applying to 8 individuals, while the EU has already imposed many more. In the case of Abramovich, it is believed that only some of the billionaire's property portfolio is even held in his own name, and thus subject to potential sanctions. The fact also remains that allegations of links between Abramovich and Putin have been ongoing for at least a decade. Owning an elite football club is a huge soft power asset with serious geopolitical heft. It should not have taken an immoral and illegal invasion to bring this to a head. Even now, the club's statement only mentioned solidarity with Ukraine, it did not condemn Russia. This reckoning for fans and shareholders of Chelsea FC is long overdue. Time will tell of the cost to the club's bottom line, but the cost already incurred to democracy, to the name of the game, that Abramovich professes to love, is harder to measure. Do you have a story you'd like to share? Get in touch by emailing jess.austin@metro.co.uk. Share your views in the comments below. More Roman Abramovich writes off £1.5 billion debt that Chelsea owe him. More Gary Neville praises Roman Abramovich's ownership of Chelsea, but says Russian billionaire is no angel. More Chelsea transfer targets having second thoughts about joining because of Roman Abramovich's ties to Vladimir Putin.